and I'm very pleased that we have as our discussant and moderator for the next panel Elizabeth Bertha, who's the Senior Director for Financial Social Innovations at Mercy Corps on their Social Innovations team. And she was formerly with the Grameen Foundation, leading their efforts around providing solutions for mobile phone-based financial services, working with telcos, third parties, and financial service providers from everything from product development to agent networks. So I think we now have our panel assembled. We have one panelist who is joining us virtually, and there she is. Well, she's here. I don't know what she's seeing. Where is she facing? She's seeing. Okay. Oh, okay. Good. But hi. And and with that, we'll just get started. Thanks very much.
So there's 300 million less women using phones than men today in the market, and so this market that's untapped. Of 2/3 of the population. It's a really interesting market for all sorts of different players to look at to understand how gender impacts mobile phone usage, especially around entrepreneurship. Women are 21% less likely than a man to own a phone, and that percentage increases from region to region. It's probably the best in Africa and the poorest in Southeast Asia. So as we look to that, and several surveys have showed, as you get to entrepreneurship, women are much more likely to use a phone, spend money on services that are relevant for them. But our challenge today is we don't have a lot of those relevant services. Probably the most useful services today are happening in the Pacific Islands. So excited today on the panel to have 2 countries represented from that region, as well as Ghana. So we're going to start off our discussions with Charmian in Tonga.
Okay, good afternoon. Good morning from Brisbane. This research aims to understand what is the transformative value of kautōlalanga in Tonga. Secondly, understand how mobile phones and money transfer platforms help to achieve this transformation. I begin with an explanation of my data collection before a brief description of the business processes and production of kautōlalanga. Finally, some fieldwork findings are also shared. As seen in this next slide, kautōlalanga is a group of Tongan women who collectively weave each other's fine pandanus mats, which each weaver then uses her mats to barter and sell for her own profit. You can find such collectors primarily in remote islands of Tonga's archipelago, such as this group from Niuatok-Tapu. The next slide shows the main central island, Tongatapu, located in blue, and my project initially proposed fieldwork on Niuatok-Tapu, which is located in green. But logistically, I was unable to visit this destination on my first fieldwork. So I needed to select a second remote case study site. I chose Vava'u Island Group, home to many weaving collectives who specialise in a dark brown mat called Baongo. The other remote case study is Hapai Island Group, and they specialise in a white bleached mat called Gear. This next slide shows a table summarising my data collection. I surveyed 4 weaving collectives from Vava'u and Hapai Group, selecting representative weavers from each collective. The total number of participants sampled from my first fieldwork is 21, of which 19 are weavers and 2 operate only as trading agents who mediate between weaving collectives and overseas customers. I carried out a survey with the 19 weavers and semi-structured interviews with the 2 trading agents. As this next slide portrays, these weaving collectives sell and barter with their prime customers who are Tongan women living in communities around the Pacific Rim, such as Sydney, Auckland, and San Francisco. Here in this next slide, the diasporic or transnational Tongan woman requires these traditional mats to fulfill her customary role at occasions, like weddings and funerals, where mats are presented as gifts of ritual exchange. This is a scene of Rochdale, Brisbane, Australia, at a church fundraiser where women are displaying and gifting such mats. These mobile mats are in themselves cashless forms of customary value. part of a wider discussion of gifts of exchange studied by anthropologists like Adrian Kepler and Phyllis Herder, to name a few. Next slide, please. The collectives I interviewed ranged from 2 to 14 members, such as this large group here in Vava'u. They organise their work according to the type of business arrangement they have with their customer. Next slide. In one business arrangement called iate, an overseas or local customer can request a specific order which the collectives follow. The mats are usually woven at a price per foot. Once it is complete, the mat is given to the customer, who then gives money to the collective, and sometimes using a money exchange medium like Western Union. The money is dispersed as wages amongst the collective. However, as I found, iate is most often performed between the weaving collectives and a local customer or local trading agent, eliminating the need for a money exchange medium. However, there are exceptions, such as this slide showing receipts of money sent to a participant from an Australian customer. In this scenario, this participant acted as a trader and weaver between her collective and the customer. The participant requested several installments from her customer to pay the weavers and fund the materials required for the mats throughout the duration of that job. This next slide shows another type of transaction known as katoanga, or gathering, which is set with a date and venue by the weavers and their customers. Now, in this case, I found the customer is most often an overseas customer. Everyone meets at this appointed gathering and exchange mats for cash or goods. And this katoanga day is a formal occasion where the weaver lays out her mats out on the grass or like this inside a large hall for her customer to inspect first. So some members of the collective can negotiate with the overseas customer to provide a shipping box full of household whiteware, furniture, or food sourced from overseas rather than cash. Next slide, please. So one way this katoanga is arranged is when the lead weaver presents the names of her weavers to a lead customer overseas and her group. So each customer overseas draws out a weaver's name in random selection to find her weaving partner. Once the weaver receives her customer's purchase order, she weaves accordingly with the labour support of her collective. They each weave the customer's mats for the same value of cash. In this case, communication is strictly conducted between the lead weaver and lead customer to reduce any confusion. So, since communication is important in negotiations, I asked questions to understand how important mobile phones are for Kautaulanga business operations. And these preliminary findings highlight that many weavers consider mobile phone technology an important tool to help operate their businesses, particularly when communicating with customers and other weavers. The moderate to intensive use of mobile phones supports the high importance placed on such technology by both remote island groups. Those who did not consider it important explain that they wait on their customers to call them, sometimes on their landline telephones, or they simply do not own a mobile phone and use the children's phones when it was necessary. On this next slide, I sought to understand the importance of money transfer agencies to business operations. Money exchange mediums are not as important for Vava'u weavers compared to those in Hapai. My interviews provide an explanation. Hapai collectors are more comfortable with asking their customers to provide cash installments throughout the mat's production. One collective has even formalized this so that a cash deposit is paid after initial negotiations, and a mat is sent to the customer to hold or secure that negotiation, or as they say, ma'u, that verbal contract. And at the gathering, the remaining cash amount and mats are then exchanged, whereas Vava'u weavers wait until the gathering to receive all their cash. So as mentioned earlier, money transfer agents are not as important for those engaging only Tongan-based customers, such as the iate or weaving per foot negotiations. Now this next slide shows a collective from Leimatu, village, Vava'u, the more northern group, known for this particular pandanus mat called Baongo. It has a dark brown colour, as you can see here. The next slide shows the pandanus plant used to make this mat. It's also called Baongo by the locals. Next slide, please. The baongo is relatively easy to prepare for weaving compared to other types of pandanus mats. Once cut down, these particular leaflets undergo an air drying process under a sheltered area. There are other steps which I leave out for the sake of time. Here in this next slide, the dried pandanus leaflets are then stripped into appropriate strands to suit the type of mat. If weavers are unable to prepare their own material, they can also purchase the pandanus in this coiled state at a local market. The next slide shows modern tools that weavers use to strip their dried pandanus into weaving strands, made by local craftsmen to make the stripping more efficient and sold at markets. Now here in this next slide, weavers use the plain weave to weave their various mats. However, what varies is the single or double layer of strands woven together, and the width of the strand and the size of the mat. This in turn affects the monetary value of the mat. Here is a table showing the differences in monetary value for the baongo mat across my 4 collectors in Vava'u. Each row explains the different prices due to transaction types, iate or katoanga. Easily you can see that there is a huge loss for weavers when they weave per foot than in a gathering for the same size mat. For example, look at VL1, the first column. For a 12-foot by 7-foot mat in an iate agreement is $200, local currency. For the same size mat in a gathering agreement, it is valued at $500, local currency. Now on this next slide is a collector from the second case study group, Hapai, known for making the gear mats. There are a variety of mats for this bleach type that exceed this presentation. Next slide, please. Gear mats are made from pandanus species called gear, and such mats have greater monetary value than the baongo because the raw material is more laboursome to prepare for weaving. And I'll explain this process quickly. The prickly edges of the leaflets are removed and laid in the sun to soften by air moisture. Each leaflet is rolled into small bundles and boiled over fire for 6 hours. Once the boiled bundles have cooled down, it is unravelled and leaflets are halved and then knotted into strands of 20. Now, as seen here in the next slide, these strands are then retted at sea for 7 nights. Once this has been done, it is laid out in the sun to further assist the bleaching process. As seen in this next slide, once dry, the strands are dunked in clean water to rinse off dirt and seawater and hung to dry as ringlets, like under verandas, a common sight outside houses in these remote islands. Next slide, please. When dried, these ringlets are undone, straightened using one's palms before stripped for weaving. Again, the weaver weaves a plain weave and makes the mat according to the agreed size and type. So here in this next slide, I have again listed the monetary value of these mats across the 3 weaving collectors in Hapai group. You can see that these white bleached mats cost a lot more than the baongo mat when you compare similar sizes. And again, weaving for a gathering would give a weaver greater returns than weaving per foot. Interesting though, the white mats made from gear are not more valuable in the customary sense than the baongo brown mat, because each mat has a purpose at cultural occasions. Next slide, please. So most participants explained that their competitive advantage over other collectors is how they decorate their mats and the straightness of their mats, borders. This is often what customers want to see, and at times they actually specify the decoration of their mats. Next slide. In seeking to understand the transformative value of kautōlanga, I asked what motivates women to weave for money. These preliminary findings show that children's education, household utility bills, then food for family and church offerings are among the top reasons why women weave mats for money. This next slide shows a graph plotting the cash payments received from kautōlanga business for all weavers in 2012. The range of income is from $600 to just over 9,000 Tongan ba'anga, or local currency. Those who receive nil are usually newly married women who have just joined a collective. So there is a higher average per annum for Hapai weavers of 4,255 than Vava'u weavers' average income of 3,240 per annum. So in the next part of the project, I'd like to actually specify what amounts are received under iate and katoanga negotiations to better understand weekly wages. Here in this next slide, Meleka, a weaver from the rural village of Vava'u, was selected by an overseas customer to have a house built for her and her family in exchange for 9 20-foot baonga mats. This is valued at 10,800 Tongan ba'anga. This is one of the first types of negotiations that includes a house in exchange for mats and sets a new precedent for overseas customers. Next slide. So money is the newest element of Tonga's contemporary global economy. And for these women, they have been part of shifting the role of breadwinner from their fathers or husbands to themselves. Certainly, in addition to transforming their built and material environments, the social, economic dynamics of a family are also affected by their weaving. I also observed agricultural transformation of what is considered now a cash crop. So these pandanus plants, which once grew wild in Tonga, are now farmed by men of the family. So that was another type of transformation I saw. The next slide outlines some key steps I'd like to achieve towards the 12-month report. Firstly, more in-depth interviews with selected participants to reinforce an understanding of the importance of technology and examine the transformative aspects that emerge from my preliminary findings. Secondly, follow new trajectories of the research to understand the perspectives of overseas customers and their use of technology. This begins to shape an understanding about the sustainability of the market within the Tongan diaspora. This could be achieved in conjunction with a katoanga held in Auckland next year. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Thanks, Charmaine. Now we're going to head over to Fiji with Milan. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And when I read that I have a session after lunch, I didn't know whether I should be happy or sad. Well, I thought I should be happy because after lunch session, normally there are less difficult questions. I feel a little bit sad that whether I'll be able to generate the necessary interest in the presentation. The topic of the research that we have is the mobile value-added services for inclusive growth, a study of women micro-entrepreneurs in Fiji. And this is a joint project between the University of Canberra, where I come from, and that is the leading university for this project, and also the University of the South Pacific, where my co-researcher and in charge of the fieldwork, Professor Bhiman Prasad, who is here amongst us, is from the University of South Pacific, and the Griffith University in Australia. So 3 universities were involved in this particular project. So the research team consisted of me, Milind Sathe. Milind is my name. Most of my students call me Million, which is all right. Bhiman Prasad is from South Pacific. Dharmendra Sharma is my colleague and professor of information sciences. Dharmendra Sharma is from Griffith University, is a banking and finance academic, like me. And Sunita Sathe is also from the University of Canberra. She is in sociology and banking and finance, both. So the main objective of our study was to understand how mobile value-added services could be leveraged to improve access to finance and the growth of women-owned micro-entrepreneurs in Fiji. You can see the woman who is a weaver there, weaving a carpet, and you have a bank there, the ANZ Bank in Fiji. And imagine the situation of the woman going to the bank or the bank going to the woman to provide access to finance, or information about the financial services available to the woman. The transaction cost is a major issue. And here the mobile comes to the rescue. And so we have a mobile in between the bank and the woman. And the women entrepreneurs that we interviewed were not only in Suva, which is an urban center and a capital of Fiji, but in the regional areas of Suva as well. So these are some pictures of Fiji women. As you can see, they are all smiling. In July, I visited for the first time to Fiji. Though I had heard about it, I didn't know where Fiji is. And somebody said, oh, it's nearby, just swim over the Pacific and you will reach there. I said, well, I'll be happy to do that, but I don't know how to swim, right? I never learned swimming. So I didn't take that chance, and that's why I'm here. So about Fiji, it's a Pacific island country, slightly smaller than New Jersey. Population is about 900K. Am I right, Beeman? Or maybe 800K? All right. 800K is more accurate? Well, now where is Fiji? Well, we'll have a look at it on the next slide. But what the pictures that you see at the bottom are the pictures of the fish that you see in the Pacific Ocean near Fiji, in and around Fiji. And fishing happens to be one of the major activities in Fiji. Besides you having large corporations being involved or large businesses being involved in it, there are many small businesses also that are involved in fishing. So here is Fiji. Are you able to see that from there? The big landmass is where I come from, that's Australia, and Fiji is not very far from there. So Fiji consists of a number of islands, but the two major islands are the one where one of the capital city is there, and the other island is there where there is another major city, Latoka. Am I right? Latoka. So these are the two major cities. There is an international airport, by the way, at Nandi, and one has to travel from Nandi to Suva. So what is MVAS, Mobile Value Added Services? Well, anything beyond voice call, if you use a mobile phone for anything beyond voice call, that is value added service. So for example, SMS, sending an SMS. So anything beyond standard voice calls, and there are 6 prevalent themes in MVAS, which is entertainment. It started basically with entertainment, music, right? Principally, then connectivity, communication-related applications, health-related issues, educational content. Then you had business-related applications, which is M Enterprise, and you had the M Commerce, the retail and the banking side of things. So the purpose of the current study was to focus on the last 2 parts, that is the M Enterprise and M Commerce. Naturally, we need to define what is a micro enterprise. The general definition that is used is up to 5 to 6 employees. We use the definition that is prevalent in Fiji, and that is as per the Small and Micro Enterprises Development Act. And this act says that any enterprise which has a turnover or total assets not exceeding $30,000, they are Fiji dollars, right? What is the exchange rate of the Fiji dollar to US dollar? Right. Well, it is about 2 Fijian dollar is 1 Australian dollar. So more or less you can say similar to US dollar, because Australian dollar and US dollar are more or less the same. And not more than 5 employees. So this is the definition, and this is the definition that we used for the purpose of identifying small and micro enterprises. The methodology that we adopted is basically ethnographic procedures, participant observation, structured interviews of women entrepreneurs, semi-structured interviews of government officials, mobile phone operators, and then the focus group discussions. The structured interviews of women entrepreneurs that we used, basically our idea was to find out what kind of businesses they are involved in, which type of whether they are using a prepaid card or they are using a postpaid mobile device, what are the types of makes of devices they are using, which is the mobile network operator with whom they are. So some of these questions we asked them, and we just wanted to find out which is the dominant player in the market, and it appeared to be that it is the Vodafone which is the dominant player in the market, followed by Digicel. Vodafone has about 50% of the market. Digicel has about 30% of the market, and the remaining is with the third operator. I tend to forget the name of the third operator, but it doesn't have much presence so far as mobile banking is concerned. So it's basically coming down to Vodafone and Digicel. The questions that we posed: what are the business, technological, and financial challenges faced by the women entrepreneurs? And after interviewing about 74 women and also observing them in using the phones, and especially focusing on the women who could provide us more information, sort of rich text which they could give us, we identified those. We also did a bit of a snowball sampling there. So the top 5 challenges faced by WMEs were access to credit, that was top on the agenda. Second was access to capital and savings. The third was access to insurance, and that is when we were talking with the women, one of the women mentioned to me, she was running a takeaway shop in a market, and basically supplying a tea vendor come some refreshments here and there, supplying food to the nearby shops. And one of the things that she always dreaded about is that she was working with the gas there, and little kids are playing around. All right. So one of the things that she dreaded was if there is an accident. All right. If there is if there is some mishap. All right. What happens to naturally to my business, to me, and how do we handle that? Unfortunately, the importance of insurance is still not percolated down to the women entrepreneurs, and it was very surprising to find that the financial services providers have not been able to push the insurance services into that area. Now, by addressing the above challenges, MVAs will be able to increase the businesses. Their growth of business can be nearly 60%, 59% growth of business is possible. That's what we came to know by talking with the women. Second, we wanted to know what is the attitude of women to the adoption of MVA's solutions, whether they are really prepared to adopt it or they think that this is something not their cup of tea. We were surprised to find that 62% of the respondents said that yes, we want it, and they see a value in it. They are also prepared to pay additional charges for it if required, depending upon how useful it can be for what they are trying to do. One of the interesting things that we noticed was the women said that what we need really is training and information. Right? So access to information and access to business training and access to mentorship is what we would like the mobile value-added services to provide to us. And and many of them were feeling a bit hesitant to visit a bank and talk to the bank officers. So we could see a bit of a chasm there in reaching out on the part of the bank officers as well as on the part of the women. And mobile phone application can be one of the ways in which that chasm can be bridged. The regulatory and competition policy issues and supply side issues, and to our great surprise, we found that in Fiji, maybe the case in other developing countries as well, it is the supply side which is the real problem, right? So basically the policy framework within which the mobile value-added services operate, the infrastructure availability, and the ecosystems. So these were the three major issues that we could identify. So there is no legislation to protect consumers. There is absence of privacy laws. When I spoke to the chairman of the Consumer Council there, she said, well, a women micro-enterprise is classified as business. And because it is classified as a business, it is not a consumer. It is not covered under the Consumer Act. And that's the reason we do not listen, or rather we do not entertain any complaints that we get from them. There was no phone available. There was no forum available to discuss mobile phone or banking issues. No protection available to women enterprises because they are considered to be outside of Consumer Credit Act. Over-regulation and policy bottleneck, cannot operate from home. A woman wanted to run a daycare center, but the law in Fiji is that daycare center is a micro-enterprise, and you cannot run a micro-enterprise from your home. You cannot run it from your garage or from a spare room in your home. You must necessarily rent out premises, right, and run your daycare center from there. So this was an interesting thing to learn. Interoperability is lacking. Even mobile towers are not shared by the two major mobile operators, Digicel and Vodafone. They are so much in fierce competition with each other that they don't want to share the mobile towers. That means they have to construct it on their own. A mobile tower costs anywhere between $750K to $1 million, and that is a prohibitive cost. So naturally they have to consider how many subscribers will be there and things like that. So the financial viability issues come in there. There is a misleading statistics of mobile penetration. Mobile penetration is judged on the basis of number of mobile phones sold divided by the population. But I can have 10 mobile phones, so that is one issue. And in Fiji, they say that penetration is about 90%, 88% to be precise. Another way it is measured is through the SMS that through the SIM cards that are sold. But when I went there, I could buy a SIM card as well. So there is an issue of statistics. No special training available for WMEs. And the last question that we tried to address was whether unbundling and disaggregating MVS solutions is feasible. One of the major problems that we came across was how to find agents in rural areas if we want to push up M-Pesa or MVAS. And several technological constraints were observed because of the sparse population in various islands of Fiji. Interoperability is an issue, network coverage is an issue. Some of the factors that help the banks drive push for MVAS is of course the cost saving, low risk of fraud, but there are a number of issues on the parts of banks as well. So the agenda for the future, there is an overwhelming demand for MVAS, and as we had our focus group discussion, we are very pleased to hear from the people. They said, well, why did you concentrate only on Fiji? Why didn't you go to the rest of the Pacific as well? How the uptake of M-Pesa can be increased, which Fiji and other PI countries. And one of the fallout of this project and also of the discussions that we had was that Vodafone and SPBD, which is a financing agency in Fiji, agreed to provide a basic training to WMEs over mobile, and Vodafone is even prepared to partly fund application development by IT students at the USP. So that is all. So Vinaka, which is thank you in Fijian. I learned Fijian in 4 days. I have become expert. So I can say Vinaka. And any questions, I don't know what they call in Fiji. So my colleague Biman will tell you about that. So thank you.
Oops, you took my cheat sheet. Okay, moving on now from Fiji to Ghana. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you our work in progress. In Ghana, poverty reduction has become a very important issue on the development agenda of the government. And one way of doing that is to ensure that women are empowered. And for that matter, women have been encouraged to belong to groups or what we call cooperatives. And within that context, it is justified because women constitute about 51% of the population, and they form the majority in the small business enterprise subsector. So because women belong into groups or cooperatives, they have been able to improve their businesses, which involve the use of mobile phones. But what is not certain yet is that does the increased use of mobile phones involve mobile money system? Does it bring about the use of mobile phones to transact businesses? That is the motivation for this paper. My colleague Dennis Chirewura and I undertook the study in one of the districts called Kasna-Nankana district in the Upper East region of Ghana, where we examined 100 rural women traders with the aim of knowing or measuring their understanding and perception of mobile money system. We used a participatory kind of approach because we wanted to really understand how this new technology is improving the living conditions of the poor women. Specifically, we use techniques like in-depth interviews, and again, we complemented that with focus group discussions. For the results, I will invite my colleague, Dennis Chirewura, to do that.
Thank you. As you can see on the slide, we are from the University for Development Studies. Our university is quite a young university. It was established in 1992 by an act of Parliament. Our motto is knowledge for service. Our vision is a world-class proposed scholarship, and we combine both theoretical work and field practical training. And we operate a multi-campus system. We have 4 different campuses located across the northern part of Ghana. And we operate a 3rd trimester field practical training program. As you can see also on this slide, the study district is indicated in the upper part of northern Ghana. It's called the Kasona-Nankana area. That is where the study was conducted. As Dr. Seydou indicated, our methodology basically focused on in-depth interviews and focus group discussions. The 3rd component of the methodology addresses an interface platform where selected women trader group leaders together with researchers and then mobile service operators will have an interaction, to share in some of the views from rural women. This slide basically addresses some basic socio-demographic characteristics of the traders that we engage or we have conversations with. Some key preliminary findings from our study in the areas of savings, the savings culture of women, their mobile phone usage, and their views on mobile money, and bartering system as it pertains to their trading activities. On savings culture, basically, the study findings point to the fact that majority of women traders still do not use banks. Rural women traders do not use banks. This is a quote from a focus group discussion, which signaled that value storage, basically in the views of rural women, has little to do with money. They consider issues of value to be basically issues that will contribute to boosting the self-esteem of women in the household. So their ability to store ingredients that they can draw from when family guests are visiting, and also when family members are sick, and also storing things that can be used for funerals during the course of death. These were some of the things that came up. Yeah, some of the vaults where some of these things are stored are indicated in the local language. The first one is Sogo, the second one is Kali. So they put valuable things they consider of value to them are safely kept in these adverts. On mobile phone usage, 77 have had experience of using mobile phones within the past 1 to 5 years. And the most popular network is the MTN. Most traders use mobile phones for contacting both business partners and relatives. The challenges associated with the use of mobile phones, the major challenge is related to network. The poor quality of the network is a major challenge. And then mobile money, as to whether rural women traders consider the buying of airtime cards or units as means of storing value for later use, a very high percentage of rural women traders indicated no. Before we conclude, there is the last lap of the study will basically involve this interface meeting that I talked about, where mobile telephone operators will have a platform to listen to us, representing the views of rural women in their presence, and there we'll have the opportunity of addressing some of the concerns directly, and the rural women can also have an opportunity to further ask questions from the operators. And from our preliminary findings, we are saying that there is a high mobile phone usage among rural women traders. The direction is that mobile money is still alien to rural women traders. And there is a potential for mobile money usage among rural women traders. But then the design must be inclusive of and responsive to their saving needs. Thank you for the opportunity to share these brief findings with you.
Thank you, Saidu and Dennis. I think some of the commonalities that we heard across that, especially with the last two, is as we start to add value-added services, one of our challenges is, one, making it relevant so that the products and services are something that somebody would be willing to pay for. But before we even get to relevancy, the issue of the network is a big challenge, especially as we push out to rural areas to utilize these services. While we were talking earlier, one of the interesting things about doing research and talking to the private sector is you're often bringing together these parties who often haven't chatted for the very first time and bringing new ideas. If I could start first with Dennis and Sado. You mentioned that you're going to have some conversations coming up soon with several different players. Can you talk about how that came about and what you expect to get out of that?
Yeah, thank you, Wei. As part of our participatory design of this study, we had envisaged that the research must be owned by the rural women traders as well as the service operators and those of us in the research community. So we initially set out to engage them to agree on the relevance of some of the key issues that we focused the study on. That set the basis for agreeing that once we were able to obtain views from rural women traders, we will have a platform that will allow us to summarize these findings and invite representatives of trader group, rural women trader groups, to such a forum, together with mobile phone operators, their representatives, to be able to share the findings and allow the operators to interrogate the findings in the presence of the community members, so that it will generate a certain dialogue that will produce immediate usable results for both, for the three parties involved, the researchers as rural women traders. They will understand the responses from the service operators about why some of the challenges exist and what efforts they are making to address those challenges. And then the operators will understand directly from the users what are the basic challenges that users are faced with in their efforts to use those services. So basically, that is the way the last part of our research effort is directed at.
Yeah. Just to add a word to that, I think the interface meeting is intended first to validate the research work that we've done, and then secondly, to give a platform, especially to the service providers, to understand the nature of problems that their services are facing and how they can improve upon them. Gone are the days where research works have been done and then results are published elsewhere without making use of the findings. But this interface meeting is going to be different, because at the end of the day, the service providers will use the findings, what they have heard from the end user, that is the rural woman, to be able to improve upon their delivery services.
And you had a similar example?
Yeah, well, it was good that she asked the question about how to bring the private parties at one place and how to start that dialogue. As a matter of fact, one of the interesting things that came across in our study was we made Vodafone and SPBD, which is the South Pacific Business Development, which is financing agency. They have their offices almost across the road, but they are not talking to each other, all right? But they came to that focus group discussion, and then all these issues came up for a debate there. And the outcome of that discussion was, and the outcome of this project was, a very concrete outcome, in the sense that they agreed, as we mentioned in the agenda for the future, that the SPBD and the Vodafone agreed to come together and provide training and information to the women entrepreneurs. So that's something they are already agreed to do it. So they are going to do it. On the top of it, because that the focus group discussion was held within the precincts of the University of the South Pacific, the people from their computer sciences division were also present in those discussions. And then the Vodafone said, well, why not? We give a project to the master students in the information sciences side to develop an application, all right? And we'll be prepared to partly fund it. So how parties can come together, and when they come together, how that can lead to resolving of the issues that could have been resolved even without having that forum. But we need a forum, and it is only then that the issues get resolved.
Okay, we have Charmaine back with us as well, so let me ask the audience if you have some questions for the panel.
Hello. Hi, Sean Dowdy from University of Chicago. I have a question for Charmaine, actually. This fascinating study on Tongan mats. And my question is less about the economics of mat transfers and mat sales, and more about the the cosmological and perhaps historical value of mats in Tonga. I'm familiar with how mats work in Samoa, for instance. In Samoa, mats are called aitunga. And Samoan mats are, the legend of the origins of them actually is that a Samoan woman went to Tonga and rescued a bunch of Samoan men who had been captured by Tongans and covered them with a fine mat. And bringing that fine mat back, the mat became known as the cover for life. And even up until recently, at least according to the work of Serge Chersakov, that these mats were used if you were an enemy with someone and you didn't want your enemy to take revenge, you would cover yourself with the mat in front of them in a kind of prestation. So I guess my question with these Tongan mats is, it's obvious they're involved in this international circulation system, but what other value, what significance do they have for Tongan women beyond being an object for wealth? I mean, do they retain a cosmological or religious value of some sort, or even historical one?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Your question reminds me of our ta'avala, which is one of the types of mats both groups make, in the dark brown or the white bleached type. And that's called the ta'avala, which is a mat that was worn historically before a chief, and that was basically to hide your midriff and as a sign of respect. And so that continues today, and is worn to formal occasions. So there is this link to its historical use in that way. But also, as I'm finding, like it's continually evolving as well. It's not just a stagnant customary value that these mats hold, and even in the diasporic situation, you know, these mats hold value in different situations, like such as a birth ceremony or a funeral, and even just the materials that are used to make those mats are evolving as well. So there are connections to its historical value, but they are also evolving.
Thank you.
My name is Dipti Kesi from IFMR, and my question is for Milind as well as the study from Ghana. And this was a woman-based, your study focused on women entrepreneurs and their access to banks or mobile phones. When we were conducting study in rural India, we found that household has a mobile phone, but women per se, they don't have mobile phones. Is that an issue in Fiji as well as Ghana also? And what are the major challenges that women face when they have, when in terms to access to finance or mobile money or access to banks?
Well, thank you for that. I divide the question in two parts. One is access to phone in the family, and then the use of the phone for financial services. Am I right? Right. So far as the access to phone in the family, well, as you rightly said, the situation in Fiji is no different from that in India, in the sense that the household has a phone. But in the case of the women entrepreneurs, because the kids, right, are also with the women while the business is being conducted, and while the husband is also helping the woman in conducting that business. Maybe he's doing errands to get the raw material or whatever is required. The restaurant that we visited, the husband was basically arranging all the raw material stuff. It was interesting to find that at times the kids were doing errands, or there was one guy that the woman had employed, because she was supplying tea and other food stuff to the entire market. And one of the issues that she was facing is that when somebody telephones to her and tells her that, well, send me 4 cups of tea or whatever pastry or whatever they want to be sent, she doesn't have time to lift the phone, okay? And so she said that it would be very good for me if somebody sends me an SMS, so that is sitting there. And when the job on the hand is over, then she can attend to that job. So that is where the issue of mobile value services came in. So far as the use of phone for access to financial services is concerned, interestingly, what we noticed was that the women were really completely oblivious of the services that are available from the banks for financing their enterprises. And when we started talking to banks, why is that? Well, of course, being an ex-banker, the banker were in the mode of defending themselves and said, we are advertising, we are letting them know to whatever sources are there. So basically, the banks were expecting that they should come to them, all right, for whatever their financial needs are. That was one. The second thing was that many of these women were trying to fund themselves through informal sources of finance. They were, when we tried to ask them that, well, what is the interest rate that you are getting charged for this? And we realized that they were being charged very exorbitant rates of interest for the informal financing, which they were getting, touching about 50% in some cases. While the banks may be prepared to provide money at a much cheaper rate. On the bank side, the issue was mainly of having the critical mass that they need for the purpose of funding. The major banks in Fiji are of course the ANZ, which is the Australian bank, and the Westpac Banking Corporation. One of the interesting things that we learned during the focus group discussion was the banks are so powerful that they are dictating the terms, and whenever the Reserve Bank of Fiji wants to, if some complaints are made to the Reserve Bank of Fiji by some woman that, well, I'm not getting finance from XYZ bank, the Reserve Bank is not in a position to exert its clout on these banks because they're so strong that they threaten in the forum that, okay, if you are going to impose these kind of things on us, we will leave Fiji, we will go back to Australia. So this was an interesting thing that was narrated to us, also by the Consumer Council president. And these are some of the ground level difficulties that we find in the context of Fiji, which are different from what we find in the Indian context. So does that help you answer? Did I answer that, your questions, or you have any supplementaries to that?
Yeah. Okay. Now the experience from Ghana, as we already indicated, the use for mobile phones for monetary transactions is limited. In fact, it's alien to the woman. But if you're talking about phone ownership and accessibility, the story is different. In Ghana, phones are generally individually owned, meaning that whether you are a woman or a man, young, whatever, you have to own or buy your phone. Nobody buys a phone for you. You have to buy it yourself. But of course, if you talk of accessibility, whereby in a household, even if one person owns a cell phone, the story is that everybody in the house can have access to the use of the phone. That one is just, there's no problem at all about that. What it means is that households do not specifically say that, look, this phone belongs to the house. It belongs to the individual, but household members collectively have access to the use of the phone. But as I said, recently, some organizations have even started supporting women groups in the communities to own cell phones so that they can use it in times of emergency. For example, I know an organization that was promoting health delivery in the communities. So what the organization did was that in each community, they organized them into groups and then provided them with cell phones so that in times of emergency like delivery, then they can use the cell phones to communicate to the nearest health centers. Yeah. So in an attempt to answer your question, the experience of Ghana indicates that cell phones are individually owned. Households do not have phones, but any individual who has a phone in the house, anybody in the household can use that phone. Yeah. You want to ask?
Further to that, I mean, when we were talking to one of the women, she said during the operation of her business, I mean, she starts the business, maybe she opens the shutters at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, which goes right up to late 9 o'clock in the night. The phone sits there in the shop. So the phone doesn't go anywhere, so that she can receive the calls and she can attend to the calls whenever she is. Her husband runs the errands, or her kids also runs the errands here and there. But after, of course, the business is shut, closed, then it becomes the phone becomes available for everyone. One of the things that they mentioned was, the woman mentioned was, I always fear the risk of losing the phone, and that's the reason we have sort of mandated in the household that the phone will not be removed from the shop. And as I mentioned before, that as per the Fiji law, you can't carry on business from your home. It has to be at a separate place.
Thank you. My name is Bruno Yawe from Uganda. This goes to Saidu and company. I don't know whether you have any plans of interviewing men or husbands, because much as you've indicated that if a phone is in the household, then everybody has free access. In a patriarchal society like that of Ghana and Uganda, I believe that's not true. Ladies might have to first consult with their husbands whether to make use of a mobile phone for any payments. I think you may have to double check that. Thank you.
Yeah, we can say specifically for the case of the study area that we carried out our study. As Dr. Larson indicated, the women indicated that they own their phones. And one of the challenges they reported for the use of the phone is related to the network service. It wasn't related to husbands prevented them from using their phones or anything like that. And they've reported also through focus group discussions that the phones have been useful to them in their trading transactions. Those who are dealing with foodstuff, they can call nearby markets, ascertain prices, arrange payments through drivers, and have their staff delivered without any interference from men. The study did not, we don't intend interviewing men. For the purpose of this particular study, it was basically focused on rural women traders. So that is the findings.
Most of the women traders that we interviewed, they were sampled from a list that was provided from the district assembly. The assembly keeps records of all the groups that operate within the area. So we got the list of these groups, and the groups comprise of only women. So the sampling was based on the list of the groups provided by the assembly. So if we would like to include men, then that may be in a different study.
Follow up a little on that history of the relationships between husbands and wives. I know that Ghana and some other parts of West Africa have been well described as areas in which husbands and wives keep separate accounts and don't control one another's use of money. And in fact, I know in parts of Ghana, historically, if a woman, say if a man bought fish and brought it to the shore, he would then sell it to his wife, who would then sell it in the market, and that would be her money. And so question is, in your part of, but I also know that commercialization and modernization often undermines the strength of women's positions and gives more advantage to men than they used to have. But I was just wondering how that's played out in your part of Ghana at this point in time, whether that kind of separate spheres of the economy still pertains in your households, or whether it doesn't.
Yeah, this question is general and goes beyond the scope of this paper, but I'll just share my experience with you. What is actually happening is that, yes, the man and the woman keep separate accounts, especially if they are engaged in the formal sector. But in terms of expenditure, household expenditure, it is still the man, in most cases, is the man that provides. But if you go to the rural areas, what is happening is that there's nothing even to talk about having accounts. They don't save money, as we even indicated. What is happening is that they keep their valuables, they keep their monies at home. So what is happening is that if there is a problem, whether the problem is affecting the woman or the man, it then becomes a household issue and the responsibility of the man. What I can say is that women generally do not have much capital to engage in bigger businesses. So more often than not, they rely on their husbands or friends or relatives to support them. But insofar as the use of household resources, especially money, is concerned, when the problem is affecting the woman, the man will not say, because we don't have the same account, he will stay away from it. No, it becomes a household problem. Even if the two of them will have to think and go outside to ask for assistance, they will do that. So in the rural areas, the story is different because both men and women don't even have what we call joint account. They don't have it. And in the urban areas where majority of them are in the formal sector, yes, of course, the man and the woman can operate separate accounts. But when there is a problem, they still look at it as a household problem, not it's yours or it's mine. Yeah.
Dennis, you were mentioning as women traders are trading in goods, oftentimes they're transferring their money via drivers. Is this a question of awareness, lack of local mobile money agents, or is there just no additional value added to use mobile money, and so it's just easier to use the drivers?
Yeah, I think it borders on their access to the drivers and how reliable the drivers are. These women traders will usually commute from one market to the other using these drivers, so they are used to them. So once they've established that relationship, if a woman is not able to go to a market and she has the phone contact of her business partner there, then she cross-check with the prices and the driver will deliver the goods. So it's convenient for them. But as we indicated in the study results, majority of the rural women traders do not even have the understanding of how mobile money transaction looks like. You are right, the agents are non-existent in the rural areas, so that partly contributes to the poor understanding of how the system works. But when it comes to convenience, it is really very convenient for them to deal with the drivers because they get direct results. Yep.
That's a great value-added service by the drivers. Tough to compete with. Other questions?